We've got some, there we go. Cool, awesome. We are live. So we're going to get, for those of you joining us, so we're going to get going in just a few minutes. Hopefully everyone can hear me and everything works correctly, or as close to correctly as I can possibly do it. So those of you who are also joining us, if you're looking for Patrick's talk, Patrick, we moved up to the noon time slot because of other kind of scheduling excitements. So we're going to be joined by Yogesh in just a moment. So just give me a second before we get going. I'm trying to do one little thing. Let's see. Just a moment. That button. No, getting closer. As some of you can tell, we're using some new technology. So just give me a moment as I'm trying to find, there's one little button I want. Where is it? Is that it? No. Pretty soon I'm going to end up looking for the button, so don't worry. I'm not going to look forever, everyone. There should be... Chat. No. Pop out? No. Everyone. No, not that one either. All right, I'm going to stop looking for it. We'll see how that part works. All right. Cool. Not that button. Bear with me as I learn to press the right buttons correctly, folks. There we go. Huh. All right. All right. I think we're all set to go. I see everyone's in the room, keeping their video on and all that kind of cool stuff. Cool. I don't know what day today is. Oh, look at that. August 11th. All right. As you, by the way, you can also see my son's been decorating back here. So now I have, these are trains that existed or should have existed at some point in New York City. All right, here we go. It's Sunday, August 11th, 2019, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today, we're joined by one of our mentors, Yogesh Sharma, to lead today's talk on product and the importance of iterative interview of stakeholders. So before we get going, let me just briefly explain the format for everyone today. The people you see in the room here today, everybody you see here in the room today are members in the Product Mentor Program, mentors and mentees all around the world. Basically, to get paired up one-on-one for the duration of about 6 months. We do 2 sessions a year to help make better product people, and then once in a while, a better product along the way. Each one of our mentors participates in the talk, and because these live streams, we just try to open it up to as many people as possible, people in the program and outside of the program, and you joining us through YouTube or the productmentor.com/live or any of the other places that you might be joining us. So everyone, if you could just wave hi for a second. Here we go. Look at that. Wow, that worked. I can't believe that. That's so cool. But what we're going to quickly do is we're just going to quickly go around the room for some introductions. And I will do my best to manage the controls here today. And so when we go around the room, don't forget to unmute yourself when I call on you. And also say who you are, what your name is, your location, your role, and whether or not you're a mentor or mentee in the program. So the first person I'm going to go to is Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Postelnik. I'm a product mentor in the program. I've been a product manager for 6 years. I'm currently a product manager at Angie's List and based in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Marvin.
Hey everyone, I'm Marvin Matthew. I'm based in New York City and I'm a head of product at cryptocurrency trading platform. I'm a product mentee.
Daniel.
Hey, my name is Dan Delponsky. I'm based in Toronto. I'm a mentee and I work at a company called Moto Insight.
Candice.
Hi, I'm Candice Zhang. I'm based in New Jersey, and I'm a product mentee in this program. So I'm currently a head of product in a company called 10-4.
Syed.
Hi, everyone. My name is Syed, as you know. I am a mentee based out of New York. My mentor is Brian. I have to share this news with Jeremy because I do want to express my gratitude to this group. I got a new job at Verizon, and he is my future boss is also a member of the group. He applied to be either a mentor or mentee. I don't know when he will start. And to Brian for teaching me, all the valuable lessons on a weekly basis.
Cool. Nicola.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Nicola. I'm based in Copenhagen. I'm product manager and a mentee here. And I work in a company called 2021 AI.
Yogesh.
Hi guys, I'm Yogesh Sharma. I'm a product mentor here, and I'm working as a senior product manager based in New York City with a company called Omnicom Health Group.
Vivek.
Hi everyone, this is Vivek from Bangalore. I'm a PM at Razorpay, and I'm a mentee in this program.
Ines.
Hi everyone, I'm Ines. I'm based in Germany. I'm a product manager for around 2.5 years, and I have the pleasure to work with Paul on stakeholder mapping. So it's a quite exciting talk for me to enjoy.
John.
Hi guys, I'm John Masterson, and I am the Chief Product Officer at a startup called ImproveWell, and we are based in London, and I am a mentor in this program.
And Patrick.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Hoffman. I'm a mentor in this program. It's about my 4th or 5th time now. I'm based in San Francisco, out in the Bay Area, California, and I head up product for the enterprise division at a company called Udacity.
Outstanding. And I am Jeremy Horn, aka the moderator here today for today's live stream, also known as the product guy. As questions come in, please post them, and we'll get the questions to the speaker in fairly real time. So post your questions to productmentor.com/live or on the YouTube chat. They're both basically the same questions. So definitely post your questions there. We'll interrupt the speaker, get the questions answered, especially if they're topically related. We'll do it pretty quickly. If it's generic, what is product management? Why am I here? Yes, I will still ask the product mentor those questions. I just might save some of those for the end of the talk. But with all that said, let me hand it over to today's speaker, Yogesh, and so he can take it away. Yogesh?
Can I share my screen?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay, guys. Oh no, it's always wrong. Sorry, just give me a second. Okay, guys. Hi. Hi. So today's topic is stakeholder management, and one of the topic which is very close to my heart is the importance of the iterative interview of stakeholders. And today's days are wonderful because we have been having a great marathon about the product management, and the topics were very much close to this topic of iterative interviewation of the stakeholders. And as we know that when we start building any product, there are a couple of things that we have to go through, and which is very basic thing. And the first thing we talk about is what do we want to do basically, and we think about, okay, who is supposed to provide us those requirements, and we say in the journal, there's a concept that these requirements are coming from the product managers. And I believe that's not the true situation. We always have some stakeholders who are providing us these requirements, some CEOs, depending on the company's size. If it's a startup, generally the CEO or the investors or some of the advisors who are providing these requirements, and those we call them stakeholders. If we talk about the corporate world, it can be internal stakeholder, it can be external stakeholder. So I just want to talk about what is basically stakeholders are. So anyone who is using the application, they can be considered stakeholders. They can be collaborators, as I just mentioned earlier. And there's people who are not directly involved with day-to-day of those products, but they are some way interested in those products in a one way or other. So it's generally I consider anyone who's a stakeholder who is caring about the product, because this product is supposed to increase the revenue of the company, or maybe bringing them more engagement, or bringing or opening a new market for these companies in a one way or other. I consider them as a stakeholder. So I believe all of us know what is product management lifecycle is, and this is the product management lifecycle I consider from my end. Is that it consists of the 6 steps, and the first is innovation and planning, the second is analysis, and third is development, and then go to market, and then we have an in life, and there's the end of product. So the first question that comes to your mind is that, okay, let's say there is an innovation and planning. What is actually happening there, and what is the role of stakeholder there? So this is the time where you are actually getting an idea that what do you want to build, or maybe there's an existing product, and how do you want to improve? So this is where the first time you have an interaction with a stakeholder, and you're trying to do an interview basically, or maybe just listening to the stakeholders, and when they are talking about the idea, what they want to build and why they want to build. And this is where you really need to absorb and listen as much as possible that, hey, what it does really mean from their perspective, why they really want to build it. And one of the reasons why I'm asking about it, because over my experience of 9 or 10 years, I've realized that a lot of product fails or in their build or after they launch is because why is never studied pretty well by the stakeholders. Whatever the requirements they were giving us, like in the beginning of the product, or maybe by the end of the product, the requirements were totally different. So that's why question was never answered with a crystal clarity from the stakeholders. And the blame which is supposed to come is generally on the product managers, that you did not do a great job of understanding the product, understanding the customers, understanding the designs. So as a product manager, your role is very, very important, that we speak with the stakeholders that what actually they want and why they want to build that. So during the planning phase, I try to absorb as much as possible that what the stakeholders really want to build. And I take those requirements, and which is very high level requirements, start thinking about the personas which they really want to build. And then I go into something we call the analysis mode. And this is a time where you start looking into the validation of the requirement, and they say, okay, is this requirement really make sense from the today's market? Are those requirements still justifiable? Like, because just because it's coming from my CEO and whom I cannot override, I cannot have an authority. So I need to influence him where he or she is not thinking in a manner, or may not have done the homework. And mind you guys, like, because the stakeholders are the people who have the industry experience, they have a greater vast experience, they have great connections. So yes, they already have done a lot of homework. So at this time, you don't want to go back to them and say that, hey, I feel you're wrong. But you want to do your homework. You want to understand the market from your perspective as a product manager. You really want to understand that the requirements that you're getting, or the vision that the person or the team of stakeholders is providing you is actually is true, and it holds true basically. And that is a time when I go back and I try to hold back a one-on-one with one of the particular stakeholder or the entire team of stakeholders in a different sessions. It can be a group session, it can be a one-on-one sessions. And the reason being is that I really want to understand that they are very clear in their requirements, and they don't want to change the requirement after every 3 weeks or 6 weeks. And if they want to do that, that's perfectly fine, because we live in the agile world. And in today's talk, even Chris mentioned that the roadmap that we want to create is agile roadmap. It's ever-changing roadmap. But it's very important that the vision should not be changing. The requirements can change, but the vision should not change. But if your requirements is impacting the vision, which happens quite a lot in the real world, that is a time where you really need to worry that there is something going wrong with the product development. So this is the second time when I go back and I try to understand why and what and how they're thinking about those solutions to be solved. The third part is very important, is a development, where I really want to hone my requirements, clear my requirements, and have a better, clear understanding, and where I want to involve my designers, my development team, that how do you want to deliver that? And that's where the technical team comes in picture, but again, the stakeholders should be involved. So now talking about the go-to market and in life right now and the end of the product, I want to go to the next slide. Why are we interviewing the stakeholders again? And we are interviewing conducting these interviews because we want to understand very, very clearly what they're looking for, which is a vision, which questions will get closer to our goal. That means if we want to build a roadmap, I really want to know what question I should be asking the stakeholders when I go to them, because I want to do my homework as a product manager, that, hey, these are the questions that I'm not very clear about, or these are the visions these are the requirements that you mentioned in the high level requirement or during the planning sessions or the analysis session, but I'm still not very clear about it. And when do you want to conduct the interview? So I already mentioned the two stages where I really want to conduct the interviews is basically the ideation stage and the analysis stage. But that does not mean that I will not want to conduct an interview with my stakeholders even during the planning stage or the development stage, because this is where I want to get more clarity, not only from the team's perspective, which includes the development team, designers, and sometimes the QA people. And if you are working in the AI ML world, I want to talk about a data scientist. But also I want to have a brighter clarity that, okay, we are on the right path. The process flows, the workflows that I'm creating, they make sense, and they are exactly what the stakeholders are thinking about. Because there have been times where I've come across a situation that we have built a wonderful workflow and we get some approval from a couple of stakeholders, but there come of the stakeholders who have not given their approval. So they say, yeah, we totally agree with other stakeholders without even looking at the requirements. And after 6 months of development, they come back and say, oh, no, this is not what we envisioned. So you want to have a clarity that all the stakeholders are on board. They understand the process flow. They understand the screen flow. And that is a very, very key point over here. The next thing is who is interviewing it. Fortunately, here it is me who is interviewing them. And the question is, how do I want to interview those people? So as I mentioned, I like to do one-on-one sessions. I like to have a group sessions. I like to have a session which I call the workshop sessions, where I like to involve my stakeholders, my designers, developers, because in that kind of session, some of the the question which comes out from the different people, like designers or developers, are the questions which you are not even thinking about because you haven't thought about the workflow completely, but the designers and technical people are thinking about those things. So this is a wonderful session to have and bringing the stakeholders, because sometimes stakeholders, they do have the idea of the pain points they want to solve. But again, the question is how they want to solve. They are still not very clear about. In this session, you bring more clarity from the team's perspective and from the stakeholders' perspective, that how do you want to do that. So coming to the iterative interview process.
I'm gonna just jump in here very quickly. We've got some questions that have just kind of come in. So the first person with a question is Candice. So let me switch over to her.
Sure.
Go ahead, Candice.
I have a very specific questions. I know you talked a lot about what kind of conversations you have with stakeholders, and even what are the different aspects you cover in the conversations. So my question is more around, so when the days get crazy, when there are many activities going on around, let's say, the product development itself, and there are multiple stakeholders, we need to keep this line of communication going. So do you have any recommendation or advice as in how to keep up with it? Because one of the challenge I have personally always find is I may end up either spending my days communicating with everyone but not making progress on the product development, or it's the other way around. I'm too focused on the product development, but then I couldn't find enough time to talk with all the stakeholders, and then there are some key points missing. So how do you keep the balance?
That's a good question. And I have faced a similar situation in the past. And this is my observation, and this is how I solved the problem in the past, is that I've tried to brought them, all the stakeholders in a one single room. And the reason being because when we continuously doing the product development, sometime we go too far in the product development when lot of the stakeholders are not on the same page. So you don't want to do a mistake of going too far in the product development when not most of the stakeholders are on the same page. So the idea is that when you're doing a development or you are doing a designing, at that same very time, you try to bring all the stakeholders on the same page, because otherwise it's a waste of effort from the development team. It's a waste of effort from a designer's team, and it's not a good healthy practice, because you realize that you have done a 3 months of development, and now the key stakeholders are not agreeing with the development and they don't want to redo work, and it's a very bad practice. And I believe we have to do this session where you bring all the team members. So whenever you feel like that, okay, I'm finding the key stakeholders. You always know what are the key stakeholders, and if you haven't identified those key stakeholders, I think it's a very important point in the beginning of the product development, or that you identify those key stakeholders who have the greatest saying. So that your key stakeholders can be or the head of the department, or your CEO, or your head, some key advisors, and sometimes the key investors also, because these key investors are also very specialized people sometimes, and they're working as advisors also. So you identify those key stakeholders and bring them in the team, and they say, and you can talk about what are the discrepancy you're finding, where are you finding that the stakeholders are not agreeing, and then you should ask why is that happening, and how should we resolve it. So let them decide among themselves, but you can identify the problems and let them know what are the problems are in this the requirement sessions basically.
Cool. We've got another question from Saeed. Let me just go to him.
Hi, Yogesh. So I have two questions. So
Sure.
First question is, how frequently do you interview your stakeholders? Is it once per sprint? What's the interval? And the second question is that, let's say if you have a large number of stakeholders or users, how do you decide how many stakeholders should be targeted for requirements, feedback, feedback gathering, or gathering feedback and interviews?
Sure. So I can share my experience working with the startups as well as the big companies, and which can give you a little bit idea about that. So when you're working with the startup companies, the number of stakeholders are relatively less. So it is very easy to identify if you are in that situation, that who are the key stakeholders. Generally, it's as I just mentioned, it can be a stakeholder, it can be your advisors, it can be some kind of specialized people who are working in your team, like because if you're working in marketing, the marketing people who are important. So depending on the kind of domain you're working in, and like in my case of healthcare, because I have most of the work I've worked is in the healthcare, I know the clinicians are important over there. I need a technologist who are very important, and then sometimes the key advisors are important. But when I was working with the big companies, I realized that the structure is very different over there. The key stakeholders are very different than the actual users, and even sometimes these actual users can be a stakeholder if the key stakeholder is providing them too much authority or autonomy to make decisions. So I used to go to those key users all the time to understand what the pain points they really want to solve them, and then I used to go back to the higher ups basically, or the development or the department heads, to confirm that, okay, this is the requirements I received from the key users whom you pointed out to be in the past, and this is what they mentioned, and what is your take about it. So now the question about the frequency depends, because we're talking about the agile environment is generally a 2-week time where we do a product planning. And believe me or not, in every product planning meeting or the sprint planning meeting, what I have done is that I have always invited my key stakeholders to talk about the stories that we want to build in next 2 weeks. And the advantage is that in those meetings is that basically I'm trying to explain the stories to my development team that, hey, this is what we are trying to build in next 2 weeks, and why are we building that. But sometime during that why session, I have realized that when I'm explaining that why are we building, all of a sudden from nowhere that key stakeholder will say, hey, oh, we are trying to build this because of this reason. So maybe the reasoning has changed. And then sometimes they say, oh, I don't know why we build this design in this particular manner. We should change it over there. So these product planning sessions sometimes generally end up is a session where you get more clarity from your perspective, but it's also a time for these key stakeholders to rethink and go back that why they provide this requirement to us maybe 6 weeks or maybe 2 months back or 3 months back. So as you know, sometimes we create a product backlog for at least six to 7 sprints, and that's why. And sometimes what happens, the stakeholders changes. New people come in the company, that their vision changes, or maybe their requirements changes. It's again a good session to have that in these stakeholders in this product planning sessions.
Cool. So that's all the questions we have right now. Keep them coming in on YouTube as well as the productmentor.com/live. And with that said, back to you, Yogesh.
All right. So coming back to this iterative interview process is like when I was talking about talking about a vision or innovation that we want to change the world.
Don't forget to share your slides.
I'm sorry, I'm not sharing that. All right. Okay. All right, guys. Okay. Okay. So, what's going on? Okay. So, I don't know what is going on here, but let me just do it. Is it visible now, my slides?
Yep.
Okay. So this iterative interview process is where I start thinking about the personas. So we create personas and we start thinking about different scenarios for each personas. And then we write down some user stories. Some of them very detailed. We start breaking down the epics into the multiple user stories. And then just for the sake of making some things really fast, I try to do a wireframing mostly on the paper. And sometime when we really want to have a stylish presentation for our investors or key stakeholders, I like to have my UX designer doing a great prototyping work where we have a real-time interaction at how this button will look like or how that interaction will change the screen view and whatnot. So during these sessions of like 2-week sprints, we try to do these persona scenarios and we try to go through the flow, and then we try to justify that are we really solving the problem that we start discussing about like 7 weeks back or maybe 6 months back when we were doing this product ideation. So during this iterative interview process of every 2 weeks, we come up with new stories. Sometimes we eliminate some stories because during this new market research, we identify something is not usable or something is not required by the user anymore, or it does not make sense from the business perspective anymore. So this 2 weeks iterative interview process is really helpful, at least for me and a couple of more of my friends who will be working in the product development. And that's you allow the development and then you build this process. Then I have.
So we just had another question come on in. Sure. This one from Patrick. So Patrick, let me hand it over to you to ask your question.
Hi, Patrick.
Sure thing. Yeah, I'm just curious how that process plays out when you don't actually have your UX designer or design resources in play.
When you don't have?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I don't have a UX designer in play, what I've done is that generally I have created the wireframes because I have some experience of working in the UX world, and generally creating those wireframes myself on the paper. That's why I said the paper is very important, because it allows the different stakeholders and even the development team to just to think about what we really want to build and how will it look like. Even though it may be looking ugly that time, it's not that presentable, but it just gives an idea. The visual gives an idea that how the things will be looking like and where they would be clicking and what kind of drop downs or what are the different kind of information they will be looking at. So this is a process which we have been using in the absence of UX designers.
Great. So that's all the questions we have right now. Keep them coming into the productmentor.com/live as well as the YouTube chat. With that said, I'll hand it back to you, Yogesh, so you can continue sharing and all the other kind of great things.
Sure. So in last 9 years, this is what I've developed, and this is not only but it's all the idea coming from a different great product managers from the world, is that the art of 3 whys and 3 hows. And that what it means is basically asking why at every stage, innovation, analysis, and development, and asking how at every stage. And this is where you actually now talking to stakeholders, and every time at every stage you're asking them, are you sure this is the solution that you're looking for? And why do you think that it still makes sense? So in the beginning of the product and development, when the ideation was taking place, I was a key listener and an observer, basically what my stakeholders was talking about. And that time I may have not asked very loudly that why, but yes, definitely I have written down that, okay, why they are trying to build that and how they want to show it. So I had some idea. Now, when I go into the analysis phase, what we do basically, this is where I start talking to some key stakeholders and some experts from the industry. I start doing my own research. And this is where I bring even my UX designer in play, that, hey, I start talking to my UX designer and say, hey, what do you think? Is this something makes more sense from the user experience perspective? And then I go back to stakeholder when I conduct one-on-one sessions, or maybe I'm conducting this workshop, which I mentioned about, where I try to bring all the stakeholders in a room and talk to them. And then I again ask them, hey, are you sure this still makes sense? Because based on our evaluation or our research, this is not making sense. But presenting the facts are very important to them, because they want to hear the facts. As I mentioned in the beginning, that these stakeholders most of them are industry expert, or they have a great access to these industry experts. So you don't want to go back without you doing your homework. And asking them again the why question is forcing them again that, yes, what I spoke about maybe 6 months back or maybe 3 months back is still relevant. And if it's not relevant, that's where they provide you more clarity, or they say, oh, I think I was wrong, and the requirement should be actually this. So this is the second time you're asking the why question. And the third time is the development, which I said, when you're doing a sprint planning, or during that sprint planning, if these key stakeholders are present, and you are, as a product manager, explaining the why to the team, the development team or designer, that time when they are listening to you and they say, hey, I don't think so this makes sense, that why that is actually presented to the team by the product manager, they may correct you, or they might again rethink, oh no, it does not make sense. So 3 whys and 3 hows is definitely working for me, and it really worked. And I identified that this is one of the one way of asking the stakeholders that please go back and do the rethinking, because rethinking is required all the time in this product development, because we don't want an outdated product, we don't want outdated features, but we don't want to bring something to the market which is not required by the customers. So this is a one way of politely and humbly asking your stakeholders to do rethinking, instead of sometimes forcing them and say, hey, I don't think this is not working, or I don't think this is the right requirement. So during innovation phase, as I was talking about, the ideas are coming thick and fast, where we're just talking about the problems that the stakeholders want to create, solve. So make a list of all the problems that they want to solve. You have a high level of requirements. You must have heard from their mouth that how they want to build. Is it possible technically or not? That's a different story at that point. And then they talk about how they want to deliver. So at that very point, you are getting some idea about why and how, and then you just document those high level requirements. What I do at this stage is that I document those requirements and get a sign off at that very level that, okay, during the ideation or planning stage, we receive this requirement, and this is how you want to solve, and this is why you want to solve. So this is the innovation phase where I feel like, okay, my work is done at product manager's perspective, but the next stage is very important, where I say analysis phase. This is where I need to do a lot of market research, where I'm talking to not only the market people or sales and development people, but also the experts over there. The experts can be, depending on the domain, it can be clinicians, it can be your fintech advisors, it can be depending on the industry, like blockchain you're talking about. So they have a security people, you have the other people in those industries. And that's how you start thinking about the customer journey. If you say, okay, if this is how the person will be logging in, this is how they will be using this application, this is how the customer journey will look like. And that's where you start thinking about personas and scenarios. And now you sit back with your designer, or if you have a designer in that scenario, you start thinking, okay, does this customer journey make sense? And you go through that customer journey as if you are a customer, and you start thinking, this is my findings are from the customer research. And does this journey really make sense? And where you feel there is no, it does not make sense, this is when you need to go back to your stakeholders and conduct those one-on-one sessions. But again, as I just mentioned, that the stakeholders are your superiors, so you don't want to have a kind of opinion battles with them, but you need to be very tactful and asking them humbly again that, okay, this is what I bring on the, this is a piece of information I've gathered. Does it really make sense, or is it outdated? Because from my experience, most of the stakeholders bring the different ideas, they are somewhat biased, because they feel like, okay, this is the way I feel that things should happen, and this is what customer want. But that may or may not hold true. And based on your market research, when you do the work with market team or the sales team, you may identify that that's exactly the case, because the customer may not be looking for those things. And you can present those facts to your superiors or your stakeholders that, hey, this is my findings are working with my X, Y, and Z team. I identify the customers are not looking for this kind of thing. Actually, they want to solve these pain points, and some of the pain points that you mentioned may not be holding true today. Maybe they were true 2 months back, but not anymore. So now you start want to talk about again the how. This is a very important piece again, because sometimes our stakeholders go overboard with the ideas that how this should be happening, and then you need to let them about, okay, if we start following this approach, it might take so much time, which you have just an estimate from your experience and talking to maybe sometimes the head of development team, and they might have given you some kind of ballpark estimates. So talking about those things are very important. And at this point, you should ask for the feedback and integrate those feedback again into your process of interview, iterative interview process. So I don't know what happened.
Hey guys, so we got another question just came in. This one from Marvin. So Marvin, I'm going to hand it over to you to ask your question.
Hi, Marvin.
Hey, Yogesh. I'm really loving your talk, by the way. Super resonant. Some of the issues I'm coming in right now with is we're in the middle of go-to-market, and that means a lot of product development. So the time for journey mapping, it's just been difficult to create that time for it. So I'm wondering, have you found a good tool for creating that customer journey map, or a template for streamlining that process?
I have a template which we created ourselves because of the, I mean, I could not find anything in the market when I was doing this kind of thing, and I had to create my own template, but I can share with you that template later on. So yes, that's very, I mean, it's a very obvious thing that you are, sometimes you do all this kind of thing, the customer journey mapping in the later part of the development, and most of the time in the startup it happens really late in the game. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of startup fails, because they are not identifying these problems of the customer journey in the beginning. So I will share the journey map with you and the entire team later on.
Now let's go over to Saeed for his question.
Hi, Saeed. I have two questions. So if how are you managing conflicting requirements and solutions proposed by the stakeholders? And lastly, if you have two equally important stakeholders who wants their needs prioritized, how are you accomplishing this task? Are you tying it to the sprint goal? Those are the two questions that I have.
Sure. So let me just take the first question, the conflicting requirements, maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah. So the conflicting requirement is one of the key challenge that I've really seen over the years, and this is one of the failure reasons. That means your team and the entire team or the company is not thinking on the same page. That's what you can get an idea about it. So what I've done in the past, where I have seen and I've failed in the past from there, and I've learned some lessons, is again, this is a time where you need to really think back that why are you getting the conflicting ideas or conflicting requirements? And maybe the stakeholders not clear, or maybe they are still not thinking about the customer journey in the way that they're supposed to think about. So what I've done in that scenario is that I've sat together with these conflicting stakeholders who are providing me these different requirements. I sat with them in the same room, and I try to go with the customer journey, first of all, that we are thinking about, that we have developed over the so many months or so many weeks. And then I asked them that, okay, I got a certain requirements from you, and I got a conflicting requirement for the other stakeholder who is present in the room. why is that happening? What is your reason, or why are you giving me that kind of requirement? So again, it's a same why question which I was mentioning about it. When you force them to ask them why, and they start rethinking that, okay, what was my reason why I gave that requirement? And when they start rethinking, you will be amazed to know that they are thinking about the same thing. They want to solve the same thing, but in a very different manner. Okay. And then you ask them that, why do you want to take this approach? So asking this question again and again, that why do you want to think in this manner? Why do you want to go to solve this approach in this manner? You will be amazed to know that half the time your conflict will go away in next 1 or 2 meetings. Only few times I've seen the situation where they are still have a conflict. And if you still find a conflict, this is a time where you really need to go to the higher ups, maybe your CEO, depending on the company, or the VP of product, that say, I'm not able to resolve this. What should I do that? But generally, I've seen that people come to the consciousness on the same page, or say they start thinking in the same manner when you force them to think why. And if you start providing a solution, because as another role that as a product manager, you're supposed to provide a solution, and you're supposed to share your thinking also, that we are thinking that this should be happening in this manner because, and just giving them your because and the reasons, and with the facts that why you're thinking in this manner, will be again a good way to bring them on the same page.
Excellent. And our next person.
I'm sorry, I haven't answered one question.
There's another part. Let me go right back to you then, so you can do the next part.
The next part is the prioritization. Prioritization is again is a very difficult task. We have so many models, and right now in the market we can talk about the Moscow model, Kano model, but the model which I really love is basically the efforts and the importance, where it falls in the importance and where it falls in the efforts. And if you realize that when you start talking about certain feature, you say, okay, I see that 2 features are equally equivalent, and they're totally important. That if you look at the weightage also, that they're bringing the revenue to us. But then you talk about what is the effort required to build one thing. One of the feature required only 1 week of effort, and other one requires 3 months. So you ask them, tell me now, one requires 1 week, one other requires 3 months, but the ROI is equivalent. So why don't we build a feature which requires only 7 days, and why can't we have a release after 2 weeks, or maybe 2 months, where we can release the second thing? So there you again coming with so you're not going with the problem, you're going with a solution there, and that's what the stakeholders love, that when you go with the solution and not with the problem. So always think about that when you're going to meet these stakeholders, not only go with your whys and hows, but also try to go with your solutions.
All right, now we're going to go over to Candace for her question.
Sure.
Thank you. I have a question around how do you set the proper expectation when you talk to the stakeholders? Because earlier you mentioned that want to ask them a lot of questions about why they think a certain way, or even like come with a solution to themselves to the conversation. So how do you balance between have them engage, make them feel like they're really contributing their opinion values, but not to have them think, okay, so this is going to be put on the product roadmap and I'm going to see the progress or results, let's say, by a certain amount of time?
Yeah, that's definitely a very challenging piece, because at the end of the day, these stakeholders are superiors. And you have to let them know that I totally respect your opinion, and I really feel that what you're bringing and your requirements, they totally make sense, and that's why they were part of the roadmap. But when you're going back with your facts, you are trying to tell them that we all have the same goal, that we want this product to be successful in the market, and taking your opinions and taking your the previous feedback, which was like maybe your previous requirements. I did my homework and our team did our homework. Basically, don't say that I did a homework. It's always our team work. So you should always let them know that the team did some homework, and why the team feels that these requirements may make little or less sense now because of the factors. So when you provide those feedback, and you can also let them know about some key stakeholders' opinions also at that point, because if you are saying that this is my opinion, your opinion does not make a big sense from their perspective, because they are the superiors. But if you let them know, let's say the Jeremy is a stakeholder, and if I say, Jeremy, I was talking to Chris, who's another key stakeholder, and he said, yeah, I know where he's coming from. I know how Chris thinks about. So, they start thinking about, okay, where is this coming from and what is the impact on this product development? Then they start syncing up and they start thinking, okay, how does this requirement make more sense?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Yeah, so just at the end of the conversation, would you suggest to actually give a very tangible next step, as in, this is a great conversation, and then here's how I'm going to follow up, or here's my action items.
Sure.
And a timeline. So I feel like that could be dangerous.
So yeah, exactly. So that's what I always prefer to do. Basically, I like to have my this feedback and then getting an email confirmation or written confirmation, because one of the lessons that I've learned over the period of time is that the vocal conversation and vocal confirmation means nothing in this world, because at the end of the product development, you will realize that there are 4 stakeholders. They will say, I never said this. I never said this. I don't know where this requirement coming from. So as a product manager, if you really want to save yourself and your entire team, always have these steps where you go back, write down this email or have some formal document and say, hey, this is what we discussed. This is the next step we are going to perform. This is how it will impact the product development, and that this will be the roadmap look like. Please confirm and please provide your sign off. This is very important.
Excellent. We're going to go over to Patrick for the next question. Patrick?
Yeah, so I think it's actually just building on some of the prior comments, and that's kind of touching on, so you've done all this work, you've aligned people, you've synthesized, maybe you have a quarter-long roadmap or something else, and one of the stakeholders comes back in and they're like, forget everything I said, I want you to like blow up what you're doing, and there's this whole other direction I need you to be going after. Like how you work through that, and also how you work through that if that stakeholder maybe is the top power in terms of the amount of sway they have of the 4 or 5 stakeholders,
sure.
As well as maybe combative, right? So how do you handle a combative stakeholder?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real-time experience for me. I had experienced this kind of thing in the past. It's a very, very tough situation from your perspective, because now you are talking about, let's say he's a CEO of the company and he's saying that, okay, whatever these stakeholders provide does not make sense, or stop whatever you were doing, whatever you built does not make sense, and scratch it off. In this scenario, you have very little option from the stakeholders, from the product manager's perspective, I'm telling you. The reason being, because at this point, you want to do 2 things. Is that either you can stop your entire team for the product development, or you have this conversation with the key powerful stakeholder that, okay, why are we going in an entirely different direction now? And just try to understand what is his rationale behind it, because maybe he just realized very late in the game that whatever we were building, we were totally going in the wrong direction. Okay, and it's better to improve yourself even before going to the market. It's okay that you wasted 6 months, 3 months, or 9 months of time, and you want to start building a rethink instead of building a product and launching a product in the market which is totally faulty. Because this is my experience, and maybe you all guys are very aware that, okay, if you brought a wrong product in the market, you bring the brand name actually ruins. So you don't want to ruin the brand name. So it's always very important to go back and understand what is the rationale behind it, why the key stakeholders is bringing this kind of totally different ball game where you have to stop working or totally have to go in a different direction. Let's say even after having that conversation with the stakeholder, you are not very convinced. This is the time where you need to go back again and need to sit with the entire team, because you have to be collaborative and you have to be transparent with your team. You don't want to keep them in dark, and let them know, guys, that, okay, we have a situation here. This is like a war room situation. And you come in a war room situation, you present the facts that this is what we have done in last 9 months or 6 months. And this is the new direction that we're getting from top hierarchy, or maybe key stakeholder or a combative stakeholder. This is the time where you start taking the input from your every team member, be it a designer, be it a developer, and let them know and get their input that, okay, if we have to go in this direction, or we have to make certain twist over here, how much time it required, what is required, and then sometime your marketing and development team. So when you go back to the same stakeholder, or maybe you invite him, the key stakeholder, to be meeting with the entire team again in the future, maybe a week or 2 weeks, you should have done so much homework that even before you ask him to present, or you should present your findings, what you have done in last 2 weeks, what are the implications, what are the impacts, how it will impact on the time manner, how it will impact the cost manner, and how it will impact in the resource manner. So now your key stakeholder will be thinking twice before making the changes, and you can provide your rationales. Okay, we can do this kind of twist, we can make this kind of twist, small twists that we can perform, and still we can make it happen instead of going the entire scratch off, or maybe the big twist in this entire product development.
Great. That's all the questions we have right now. Keep them coming into the productmentor.com/live, as well as the YouTube channel. With that said, let me hand it back to you, Yogesh, to take it away.
All right. So I was talking about the development phase here,
and don't
guys.
forget to share your screen.
I'm sorry. It's keep on happening. All right, so I was talking about development phase, and where we are developing the stories, we are creating a prototype. During this sessions, we are talking about the desirability of each story, usability of each story, feasibility of each story, and viability of each story. So as I was talking about sprint planning, this is where your stakeholder will be again thinking, oh, why it is still important to user, why this solution is better than other solutions, because it maybe in your market research you found that other solution exists in the market and they're not doing well. So if the solution which is existing in the market not doing well, why do you think this will do better than those solutions? And how it is technically viable or not possible, or if it is technically possible, what are the different implications on the time management or the resource management? And ask for the feedback during the sprint planning. Sometimes there will be a zero response you will get, because the stakeholders will be okay. They say, yeah, I'm totally okay, whatever you're building. And they will not say anything until they see the product and how it looks like after 2 weeks, or maybe when you are meeting after a month, which is like a different approach from each company. Like in my company, we used to do a bi-weekly product review, where we have to show that what we have built and how we have built, and then get a feedback from the customers or from the key stakeholders. So the next is, what is the benefit of an iterative interview process, which is very important. Now, this is what my experience says, that once you start doing this iterative process and you are keeping in the loop the stakeholders all the time during the development, during the analysis phase, and during even testing phase, you build a great trust. Now they know that, okay, this product manager or this product team is really taking my words seriously, and they really care about this product, first of all. Second of all, they also start learning about your working style, and you also start learning about their working style. So you build a greater harmony within the team. Third, another aspect is, which is I mentioned about, is the clarifications. It provides them a clarity that, okay, not only about your thinking, but also their thinking, because what they thought about 6 months back or 2 months back is not holding true in their mind itself. Forget about our mind. So they go back and they start rethinking about the requirements. Also, it also increases our confidence as a team that, okay, now the requirements that we're getting, and they haven't changed or they're not changing, because every time we're doing these whys, and the answers we are getting to these whys and how sessions are same. So that means that your stakeholders are very, very clear with their requirements. They have a clear vision, and the vision makes sense to them today also. It was making sense to them 6 months back also, which is a great booster for the team. So, and it's also important from your Jira board perspective that you're not changing a requirement or not deleting a requirement or whatnot. And also it's establish a relationship. The next piece that I've really identified, it's very important, and it helps that when I'm thinking about the future problem. So like in the previous session, the Patrick or maybe the Chris and John, they also talk about this part of the future requirements. So sometimes we're trying to solve the requirement that we get a requirement from the stakeholders or from the customers, which we want to integrate in the future. And then you start thinking about the platform during this development phase that, okay, we want to integrate those problems, or we want to solve this problem in the future. So let's build a platform in such a manner that we are able to absorb those requirements, or we are able to integrate those requirements in the future. Last but not the least is the developers, and it brings a great collaboration and transparency within the team. This is one of the key problems that I have identified that development team always complained about. That I don't have a transparency about this requirement. I don't have a transparency why are we getting these requirements? And you want to avoid the situation that people, whether the team says I don't have a transparency, or you feel like there's a lack of collaboration within the team, which is great. And last but not the least is the smoother roadmap. The roadmap will be agile, which we all know that, but at the same time, when you bring the new requirements, or when you change the requirements, you have a roadmap which shows, okay, this roadmap was created in August 2019, this roadmap was created in April 2019, and then you can see that the roadmap has certain changes in last 4 months, and then you can see what was the reason. And yes, we have thought in this manner in the past, but now we are looking in this feature in this way, and it avoids chaos. Thank you. Any more questions?
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks. I'd like to thank our speaker, Yogesh Sharma, for today's discussion of the importance of iterative interview of stakeholders in the product process. And as always, the presentation will be posted up on our SlideShare channel. And also just a big thank you from me, Jeremy Horn, your moderator, also the product guy, and everyone else who joined us here today on the Product Mentor. And also don't forget, if you're interested in being a product mentor like today's speaker, Yogesh, the product people of all sorts, all around the world, please visit theproductmentor.com and sign up today. And also, if you're looking to fill a new product job with a great product person, visit our very own free-for-all job board at theproductjobs.com. And with all that said, thank you guys. Thank you all for coming, and I'll see you guys all next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.